Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the Sunday slate for the NFL. In this segment, we're taking a look at the 13 biggest college games, in my opinion, for this weekend, picking a couple upsets, picking some of the best games I think we've had all season long on the slate, in the deepest college slate of them all so far. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with the message in it. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use the super chat feature to do the exact same thing. If you do either of those, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, September 27th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are taking a look at the 13 biggest college football Week 5 games. One of them taking place tonight between the Washington Huskies taking their team across the country, their first Big Ten game, taking on the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Couldn't get that one out there. Rutgers coming off of a huge win at Virginia Tech last week, winning 26-23. Washington off of a loss to Washington State and a bye week. This is going to be a big game for both of these teams. Both of these teams need a win opening up Big Ten play. Both of these teams need a big win to say, hey, we are here. Rutgers still undefeated right now, favored by 1.5 at home. Biggest game tonight. Both of these teams feature very good defenses. Kyle Monangai, I talked about him before the Virginia Tech game. He is going to be a problem if Rutgers wants to win this game. He's getting about 25 carries a game every time they win, which is a recipe for success. This is a good Washington defense, though. I think when you take a look at these two defenses together, they stack up pretty closely. They're both very good against the pass, although that's neither of these teams' specialty right now. Washington likes to push it downfield just a little bit. Washington's offense is a little bit better. Their defense also is just a little bit better. Because of that, even though it is on the road, I do think this is going to be a very good matchup. I'm leaning towards Washington in this one. I'm leaning Washington. They win 26-23, although I would not be shocked if Rutgers, who is a good team this year, takes them out in a welcome to the Big Ten moment. Up next, Arizona traveling to number 10 Utah, who's favored by 9.5 points. The big question with this game is Cam Rising going to play? That's going to be the big question with any of the Utah games going forward. He's going to be a game time decision. At least that's what it seems like right now. Last week, it seemed like he was going to play. He didn't. This week, I'm not sure. I'm just going to assume he's not and, just roll with the punches if he is. Arizona coming off of a tough loss against Kansas State recently. They were ranked in the top 25, no longer up there. That offense is prone to break out against just about anyone, but that defense is not good enough. Their offense was shut down pretty solidly by Kansas State's defense, and I think Utah has a much better D than Kansas State. Kansas State, not really built on its defense. Utah very much is. Because of that, despite T-Mac, despite Noah Fafita, I'm leaning towards Utah, though I do think Arizona's offense can keep this close, especially without Cam Rising playing. Without Cam Rising playing, I think Utah wins but doesn't cover. If he does play, I think they cover. I'm going off the option that he does not play, and Utah wins 17-23. Then we get an SEC battle. Ole Miss playing their first real opponent of the year, taking on Kentucky, welcoming them to their home turf. favored by 6 points. Like I said, Ole Miss has yet to play a real opponent. They're ranked number 6 in the country, pretty comfortably in that top 7. Like I said when I was doing my rankings, there's a top 7 in the nation, and Ole Miss is absolutely a part of it. Ole Miss's offense and defense seem to be clicking on all cylinders. Kentucky loses to Georgia by just 1 point in a game that I think if they were a little more aggressive, they maybe even could have won. That Kentucky defense can cause problems. This is a very good Ole Miss team. It's going to come down to the trenches. I think Ole Miss is going to have enough. Favored by 6 points in this one. It's going to be, favored by 16 points in this one. It's going to be a tight game. I think that spread is way too big. I think Ole Miss is able to pull it out, but I don't think 16 points is enough against a good Kentucky team. They're going to take some of these teams to the brink here. Ole Miss wins 33-21. Up next, the Oklahoma State Cowboys take on the Kansas State Wildcats in one of the biggest matchups of the year for the Big 12 so far. Kansas State coming off of a upset loss against BYU, a team we'll talk about in a little bit, favored by 5.5 points at home. Oklahoma State, a team that was supposed to be really good offensively, powered by that ground game, and Ollie Gordon, one of the best running back in the nation last season. He's back. He has struggled a lot against heavy boxes. Less than 50 yards in each of his last 3 games. Under 3 yards a carry. That's not what you expect out of one of the best backs in the country. Alan Bowman has been able to step up in his absence, or I guess lack of production. He has these games where he throws for 400 yards, but both of these teams, Oklahoma State and Kansas State, are wildly inconsistent. I don't know if I'm going to get the Oklahoma State team that, almost loses to Arkansas. I don't know if I'm going to get the Oklahoma State team that dominates its next couple opponents. I don't know if I'm going to get the Kansas State team that dominates against Arizona. I don't know if I'm going to get the Kansas State team that should have lost to Tulane. These are two teams, or I don't know if I'm going to get the Kansas State team that lost to BYU. Right? These are two teams that are wildly inconsistent, and it's really tough to predict them. I like Kansas State just a little bit more. Their versatility offensively, I think Avery Johnson with his legs and his arm will be a little bit better than the Cowboys can handle. I think the Kansas State defense is slightly better. 5.5 points is too much, though, in this one. I think Kansas State wins in a slight upset, 31-28. Then we get to the team that beat Kansas State last week. Number 22, BYU, ranked, taking on Baylor. And Baylor, at home, is favored by 3 points. Baylor took Colorado to overtime, or I should say Colorado took Baylor to overtime in this one on a Hail Mary last week. A crazy way to end the game. Baylor, I don't think, is nearly as good of a team as BYU is. BYU is a very tough opponent. They're very good on the road as well. That's something you don't see a lot in college football, a team that's just as good on the road as it is, at home. BYU's defense, turnovers. That's what it feasts on. That's how they were able to beat Kansas State. Baylor is a team starting a backup quarterback, I believe, and because of that, I don't think they're going to have the juice to beat a good BYU team. BYU wins 31-20 in yet another upset. Then we get a fun one. I'm very high on Indiana. They host Maryland, their first real team. Again, we talk about how Ole Miss has yet to play a real team. Indiana has yet to play a real team as well, unless you count UCLA, although UCLA not very good either. Indiana has won by a lot of points in all of their matchups, as they should have. This is their toughest matchup of the year yet. Favored by 7 points at home. I love Kurt Cignetti's squad. Take a lot of JMU Dukes with them. They dominate. Of course they do. Kurt Cignetti finds a way to win wherever he goes. I think they win this game. 7 points is a lot, though. Maryland's a solid team. I think Indiana wins 27-21. Puts them on the roadmap. Gets them ranked in the top 25 at the end of this week. Then we get our first, or we're going to save that one. We're going to save that one for a little later. Arkansas travels down to number 24 Texas A&M. Texas A&M, a team whose offense I'm a little concerned with. They haven't been able to put up those big numbers against good schools yet. Their defense is definitely for real. No doubt about it. But Arkansas is a team that whoever they play seems to just end in chaos. Whether they win or lose, they just seem to cause chaos around them on the football field. And chaos and this Texas A&M team don't really seem to mix. I don't know if Arkansas is going to win this game or not. In fact, I don't think they will. But a 6-point spread, I think, is too much for the chaos that is Arkansas. Arkansas loses 20-23 in a tight game that, doesn't look good for either team. Then we get Fresno State taking on UNLV. UNLV, biggest story of the week, loses their quarterback Matthew Sluka, who starts redshirting after not getting the NIL money he thought he was going to get. It was just a miscommunication between his agent and the coach. The agent, not very good. Didn't really work out. It's a shame. But they've got a solid backup. Haj Malik Williams completed 70% of his passes at FCS Campbell, the all-time leading passer over there. Sluka, while he was leading their team to 2 solid victories over 2 Big 12 schools, he couldn't really sling the ball. He couldn't really throw the ball. He was a lot more of a rushing quarterback. Having a guy that can throw the ball through the air is going to be a game changer for UNLV. I'm not counting them out of the playoff race yet. I need to see what happens. They're favored by 2.5 points against a good Fresno State team, a Fresno State team that kind of went toe-to-toe with Michigan in week 1. I'm taking UNLV in a close one, 28-27. Then we get outside of Oklahoma State and Kansas State, we've hit our my top 4 favorite games of the week. Starting at number 4. Number 19 Illinois travels to Penn State, ranked number 9 in the country. Penn State favored by 19.5 points. First of all, before I get into the breakdown of it, that's way too many points. This is a good Illinois squad. Illinois squad that is up there in offense in the rest of the Big Ten. A Penn State squad that struggled against lesser opponents so far, just a little bit, although they've been able to survive it. Illinois' defense, arguably just as good as that Penn State defense. Their offense, while it probably hasn't been as good, hasn't struggled against a team like Bowling Green, hasn't fallen behind a lot of their opponents like Penn State did. I think 19.5 points is way too much, and in fact, I think Illinois pulls this upset off. I think Illinois wins this game 27-20 in Penn State. It's going to be chaos if that happens. This should be a fun game. My number 3 favorite game of the week. Washington State travels to number 25 Boise State. Boise State favored by 6.5 on that blue field. This should be a lot of fun. The 2 best group of 5 schools, in my opinion, duking it out. If Washington State wins, Boise State is out of it for good. If Boise State wins, Washington State isn't out of it for good, but it makes it a hell of a lot harder to make it into the college football playoff. This is going to be one of the biggest games for college football playoff implications of the entire season. Boise State and Ashton Genty going up against a not-so-good Washington State defense. They should tear it up. Washington State, that defense at Boise State is scoreable. It's a team that you can score on, definitely. I think Boise State has the upper hand here because they're at home, because their offense and defense are just slightly better than Washington State. I think Boise State takes this one 31-24. My second favorite game of the week. Number 15, Louisville, traveling to South Bend, Indiana, taking on number 16, Notre Dame. A Notre Dame team who's favored by 7 points in this one. Louisville, whose offense is one of the best in the country. Their biggest issue on defense is going against a running quarterback, of which Riley Leonard is, but they shut a lot of that down when they went up against Georgia Tech last week, winning 31-19. The Notre Dame defense always is good. The offense, on the other hand, has struggled a little bit. Aside from putting up 66 points just a couple of weeks ago, they lose to Northern Illinois, only put up 14 points. If you find a way to slow down that run game, of which Louisville has a very good run defense, there's a difference between run defense and stopping a rushing quarterback, but a good Louisville run defense is kind of an Achilles heel for Notre Dame. Notre Dame is favored by 7 points, and I take Louisville +7 any day. I think Louisville wins this game 34-28. A massive upset, really rocketing up Louisville in the playoff percentage, almost eliminating Notre Dame. And of course, that leaves the game of the week. Number 2, Georgia, traveling to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to take on the number 4 Alabama Crimson Tide. This is no longer Kirby Smart versus Nick Saban. Now we get a brand new era of Alabama football against the new powerhouse, which is Georgia. Alabama won last year in the SEC championship game, eliminating Georgia from the playoffs, basically. That is a stain on Kirby Smart's record. He doesn't like that. This Georgia team has a lot to play for. This is the biggest game of the year. Number 2 at number 4. This should be a lot of fun. Georgia favored by 1 point, and that defense with the Bulldogs is going to be a problem. They struggled a little bit offensively this year, though. There were a couple of halves this season where they just haven't been able to get it going. Against Kentucky a little bit. Against Clemson in that first half, they weren't able to get it going. Alabama has been clicking on all cylinders on most of their games, outside of the USF game where they struggled until the very end, but they figured out a way around it. This is going to be a good game. I think Georgia pulls this out, though. I would not be shocked if Alabama takes it, but I'm taking Georgia in a revenge game here on the road to win 30-28 in the biggest game of the year. These two teams may meet again. It's not guaranteed with how good Texas is playing, but this is the deepest week of college football so far, and I cannot wait to watch all of it. Let me know what your thoughts are on any of these games. There are a lot of really good ones. 3 ranked on ranked matchups, a couple of huge group of 5 matchups as well. This should be a lot of fun. I can't wait to break all of it down over the weekend on Monday. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we are turning our attention to baseball. The final of the MLB Power Rankings, or I say the final of the in-season MLB Power Rankings, are up next. So stick around for that here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.